people that can regulate their state very well, moment to moment, are very, very powerful people in the world. And we tend to gravitate toward them for leadership, and we tend to gravitate toward them for partnership, if we're making good choices, and we tend to gravitate toward them for co-parenting. These are great assets to have, and yet we're never really taught how to do it.
Everything's fine and good in life when you meditate, you're exercising, you're sleeping well, until your pulse rate hits 150. When you're on the freeway, you're in traffic, and you get a text that something might be critically wrong with a family member. Or you're in a long-duration stress event, like you have to navigate a cancer diagnosis of a close friend. So how do you do that? How do you regulate and maintain optimal decision-making?
There are many different tools in wellness and in health, but the tools that are really starting to pick up force, and this is where, and traditionally sat within the kind of confines of the meditation culture or in very kind of obscure environments to most people, are the inside-out tools. The ones that allow you to say, okay, I'm not feeling good, and instead of looking elsewhere, I'm going to do something to change my state, and then I'm going to arrive in the world differently. Right? And those are the tools that are picking up so much force, and those are a few of the ones that I'm going to give you today. States are just very powerful. So we know when we're in a good state, when we feel good. You could call that happiness if you want. When you feel creative, when you feel focused. But sometimes feeling focused is the worst thing if the thing that's in front of you is something that you don't want to be focused on. So we can't really talk about being focused. We need to put better definition on these things. And so states can be broadly divided into different categories, but I like to think of them in terms of what has traditionally been called arousal states. I don't want to discard with the notion of stress, right? Because you can be dead. I don't think anyone wants that. You can be in a coma. Nobody wants that. You can be sleepy, and that's a great state to be in when you want to go to sleep. And it's a terrible thing to not be in that state when you want to sleep or you need to sleep. You can be alert and focused, which is great. And I think that's the state that most of us want to be in most of the time, unless we want to be asleep. And then we start ascending in kind of these levels of arousal that have to do with being kind of like heart pumping a little fast, breathing accelerates, and you start losing your ability to make really good adaptive decisions. You become self-conscious. Lots of these kinds of things start to escalate. And then at some point, that stress becomes often enough or severe enough that we would call that sort of chronic stress, and you start getting all the deleterious health effects and things like that. And then there's just like freaking out.
What you find is that there are all these communities of people that are doing things that are truly scary, and they're doing them by regulating their state in very specific ways. So in interfacing with these military communities and people like my friend Michael Muller, who KJX at White Shark Dive to collect RVR footage, you sort of ask, what are you doing? Are these people really crazy? Next, I think this month, the movie comes out about Alex Honnold, who free soloed, no safety gear whatsoever, up El Cap. If you meet Alex, he's a pretty mellow guy. Right? He's not crazy, he's not an adrenaline junkie. So how do guys like Muller do this? I don't really care about his neurology. What I care about are the protocols that people use to put themselves into high stress scenarios that are truly life or death, and that can be exported to people in more typical civilian form that might allow them to maintain calm under conditions of stress. But now, so the question is, what are behavioral interventions that will allow people to adjust their state, and which ones are available? And what are they? Which ones work for everybody? Because individual differences are great until they become a barrier to actually doing something. And what sorts of states are we trying to achieve? And here are a number of different arousal states, and I don't have to describe the slide for you to make sense of it, but I think the two things that people really want to know how to do on command is be alert but calm, right? That's nice. And asleep when they want to be asleep. That would be a huge advance for neuroscience and wellness, to be able to achieve those states reasonably well 90% of the time when you want to.
You've got your vision most all the time, and you've got your breathing most all the time. And those are the levers that you can use to manipulate and push your nervous system in the directions up or down that you want to go, so that you can make more adaptive decisions, whatever those things are. Not our lab, but the Krasnow lab at Stanford discovered there's a direct link between the portion of your brain that controls emotion and the portion of your brain that controls breathing. And they run in both directions. Voluntary breathing can shift your emotions and your inner state. Your inner state can shift your breathing patterns. So that's sort of just fundamental. Without that in hand, you can't really believe that breathing is a powerful lever, but with that in hand, there's strong reason to believe it is. That not just that your breathing quickens when you get scared, but if you quicken your breathing, you can also get scared, right? Okay? So breathing has a couple different components. You can breathe through your nose, you can breathe through your mouth, and you got a couple nostrils, and so you can do that kind of variation. And then there's these different patterns of breathing, and we don't have time to get into all of them today, but here's some general themes to think about, and then we'll start stepping through some protocols, and then I'll give some more information. First is, in general, most of the breathing protocols that you'll encounter either emphasize inhaling or emphasize exhaling across the breathing session, okay? And the ones that emphasize inhaling, not surprisingly, tend to bring more oxygen into your system and kind of ramp up your energy levels, get you into a higher arousal state. And the ones that emphasize exhales tend to bring you down a notch in what they call more parasympathetic mode, or kind of into more relaxed state, okay? And your nose and your mouth, it's been argued, blow off carbon dioxide, which is the stuff that actually makes you breathe. You take a breath because your brain senses, oh, carbon dioxide's going up. If your head's underwater, you quickly start panicking, and then you go for a gulp of air, right? So you don't breathe for oxygen, you breathe to blow off CO2, and you get oxygen as a consequence of that. So we're familiar, or some of you are probably familiar with Wim Hof type breathing, Kundalini breathing, breath of...
There's tons of breathing: holotropic breathing, Stangraph breathing, apnea-induced breathing, freediver breathing. Here's the take-home message that I think is most relevant here. And forgive me for the people on this side of the room. Breathing protocols that emphasize inhaling are generally going to drive you towards higher arousal states. So if you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for a moment, and breathe out for 2 seconds, and you keep repeating that, you're going to ramp up your levels of autonomic arousal. If you look at holotropic breathing, and we talk about nasal and mouth breathing, closing one nostril, but let's just keep it really simple. The opposite is also true. Exhale emphasized breathing generally decreases arousal. And so you can start to think of it as inhale for a period, that's maybe a 2 count, hold for 2, exhale for 1, hold for 1, and then repeat to increase arousal, lower arousal. Now, what if you want to just maintain optimal, kind of dialed in, calm focus? Well, people from the elite military community call this box breathing. You breathe in for a portion of time, you hold, you exhale for a portion of time, you hold, you repeat. It's a great way to anchor your neurology in sort of an arousal state to stay in the same place and be able to function properly. These ones can be used to drive you up or down the arousal pathway. And there are individual variations. Now, if I could just have 1 minute, I'll give you an important detail, which is how long should you make each phase? I've just put the ratios, 2-2-2-2 or 1-2-2-2. Has to do with your ability to manage carbon dioxide. You don't breathe because you need oxygen, you manage carbon dioxide by breathing. Okay, if I hold your head underwater, at some point your blood starts to feel acid, you want to panic, and you want to take a breath. Okay, so it's all about CO2 tolerance. Who are the best people at managing CO2? Free divers. And so what do? They measure their CO2 tolerance, and you can do this also. So what you do if you want to know your CO2 tolerance, and sorry for the marathon runners, this has nothing to do with fitness, 0. This has to do with how well you manage stress in the moment. So when you wake up in the morning or now, you're going to have very different CO2 tolerance. The way to measure it is you take a couple nice deep breaths through your nose in and out, mouth closed, and then you time yourself how long it takes you to get rid of all your oxygen in a slow nasal exhale. That CO2 blowout time tells you your CO2 tolerance in the moment. It tells you how well you're managing CO2. If you're a skilled free diver, you can go down for minutes. Houdini used to go into a box for 9 minutes doing this, managing his carbon dioxide. He wasn't superhuman. Okay, that's how David Blaine does it too. There's nothing mysterious or magical about it. So if you blow out in less than 25 seconds, I recommend, if you blow out in 30 to 60 seconds, which is how most people blow out in kind of a pseudo-calm, pseudo-alert state, then I recommend breathe in for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, hold for 5, repeat. Maybe 20 cycles, 10 cycles, whatever you have available to you, even in real time. And then you can adjust that up. You could halve that or double it depending on whether or not your blowout time is less than 25 seconds or more than 60 seconds. Even though I'm pretty happy and up here and doing this, I can tell you right now, if I were to measure my CO2 tolerance, my CO2 blowout time right now, it's going to be significantly below 20 seconds because I'm doing nothing but exhaling as I'm talking, inhaling, exhaling. I'm in a state of high autonomic arousal. And if you're sleepy, you can run this through the arousal protocol and so forth.
And box breathing, Mark's a former SEAL team guy, is a tool that people use to regulate their state and stay in these kind of balanced oxygen CO2 ratios to kind of stay in a plane of focus that allows you to be in good decision-making mode, right? Or good kind of adaptive mode for a physical endeavor. So box breathing is something you can pretty much do all the time, and kind of learning to rotate your breathing around a 1-1-1-1. So inhale, hold, exhale, hold. What if you start to emphasize the exhale? The people vary here, but the overall effect tends to be one in which it's less autonomic arousal, like you want to go to sleep soon. And so the way to do this is very simple, and we can do this now, so I'll give you the tool, is you're going to inhale slowly through your nose, or let's say a 3 count. 1, 2, 3, then hold for 3. Then exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 3. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.